An alien warlord surrendered his entire fleet because a single human taught him warmth. No one understands how empathy stopped an empire built on ice. Where are you watching from? Subscribe, join our crew, and let's begin the story. The emergency panel died with a flicker. Its last message blinked 3 times in pale blue. Don't panic. Then darkness swallowed Outpost, halcyon whole. Mara Quinn pressed her palm against the nearest wall and felt ice weeping through the metal. The temperature had dropped 6 degrees in the last hour. Her breath came out in clouds that hung in the air like accusations. Outside, the ionic storm howled across Astra Corvus, a sound like glass grinding against bone. She should have left with the others. Commander Yates had given the order 40 minutes ago, his voice crackling through the failing comms. All personnel to the evacuation shuttles, no exceptions. Medical staff first. She had nodded, helped load the stable patients onto gurneys, watched the last transport lift off through the observation window. Then she turned back to the 3 unconscious bodies in Ward 7. 2 humans, 1 alien, all critical, all breathing on machines that would die the moment she unplugged them. Mara pulled her jacket tighter and returned to her patients. The alien's skin had taken on a gray pallor, and the smaller human, a teenager from the mining colony, had started seizing an hour ago. She had stabilized him with the last of the anticonvulsants, but his vitals were trending down. Her brother Daniel had died on a station like this. Different sector, same story. Too many wounded, not enough ships. Someone had to stay. He had drawn the short straw. Or maybe he had palmed it, the way he always did when they were kids playing cards. She would never know. What she did know was this. She was done running first. The heating grid sputtered. The backup generator had maybe 2 hours left, and that was optimistic. Mara grabbed the last thermal blanket from the supply locker and draped it over the teenager. She took off her own jacket and wrapped it around the older human, a transport pilot who had crashed trying to deliver supplies. The alien she covered with 2 medical sheets, layered thick. Then she sat down between them and waited. The outer airlock hissed. Mara's hand went to the scalpel in her pocket, muscle memory from rougher postings. She stood slowly, positioning herself between the door and her patients. The figure that entered was not human. He was tall, wrapped in dark armor that reflected no light. A crest ran along his helmet, sharp and organic, like a blade grown from bone. Bioluminescent marks traced his gauntlets, pulsing faint red in the darkness. Kari. Mara recognized the design from briefings. The Dominion that never took prisoners, never left medical stations standing. The Kari warrior scanned the room with methodical precision. His gaze lingered on the dead heater, the 3 bodies, the woman standing between him and them with a scalpel meant for surgery, not combat. He spoke through the helmet's translator, his voice filtered and cold. Step away, human. Mara tightened her grip on the scalpel. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her voice came out steady. If you're going to kill me, wait until I finish this bandage. She turned her back to him. Her hands shook as she adjusted the pilot's IV line, but she kept them moving, kept the motion smooth. Behind her, she heard the soft click of a weapon being armed. Then nothing. The silence stretched. Mara finished the bandage, checked the flow rate, marked the time on her wrist display. When she finally turned around, the Kari was still there, weapon lowered. Something in his posture had changed. The rigid efficiency had cracked, just slightly. He tilted his head, studying her with an intensity that felt more curious than hostile. You did not run. I don't run anymore. The warrior stood motionless for another moment. Then he raised his gauntlet to his helmet and transmitted something in his own language, harsh and consonant-heavy. When he switched back to translated standard, his tone had shifted. Structural integrity compromised. Ionic interference prevents safe demolition. Recommend tactical withdrawal pending atmospheric stabilization. He was lying. Mara did not know how she knew, but she knew. The outpost was a ruin, but it was stable enough. He was buying time. The Kari turned to leave, then paused at the door. The cold will kill them before dawn. Then I'll keep them warm until dawn." He left without another word. The airlock sealed behind him with a hiss that sounded almost gentle. Mara sank to the floor, the scalpel clattering from her shaking hands. Outside, the storm screamed. Inside, 3 people breathed in rhythm with failing machines. She was alone with the cold and the dark, and the choice she had made. But somewhere in the ruins, a Kari warlord was telling his troops to stand down, and he did not understand why. The Kari returned an hour later, carrying something that looked like a toolbox made of bones. Mara looked up from checking the teenager's pupils. The boy was slipping, his breathing shallow and rapid. She had maybe 30 minutes before she lost him to the cold. The warrior set the box down with surprising gentleness. When he spoke, his translator carried an edge of something that might have been frustration. "You are still here. Where else would I go?" He gestured at the dead heater with one clawed gauntlet. "This is inadequate. You have access to subsystems?" Mara blinked. "You came back to help me fix the heat." I came back to prevent thermal failure from compromising structural integrity." A pause. "Yes." Despite everything, Mara almost smiled. She pointed to the maintenance bay. "There's an old thermocatalyst under the floor plates. Medical grade, designed for long-term life support, but it's been offline for years. I don't know if it still works." "Show me." They moved to the bay, Mara leading the way with a hand-crank flashlight that cast jumping shadows. The warrior, she noticed, moved with absolute silence despite the armor. Only the faint hum of his suit's reactor gave him away. She knelt and pried up the floor plate. Beneath it, covered in frost and dust, sat the thermocatalyst. It looked less like medical equipment and more like abstract sculpture, all curves and spiral channels designed to maximize heat distribution. The Kari crouched beside her. This close, she could see details in the armor, micro-engravings that might have been text or decoration, the way the bioluminescent marks pulsed in time with his breathing. "You have ignition source?" he asked. "No power cells. The emergency reserves were depleted during the attack." "Oh." Mara ran her hands over the catalyst's surface, checking for cracks. "Even if we had them, the starter coil is probably fried." The warrior was quiet for a moment. Then he did something Mara did not expect. He removed his helmet. The face beneath was beautiful and terrible. Sharp features that were almost human, almost not. Silver eyes with vertical pupils, skin marked with the same bioluminescent patterns that traced his armor, glowing faint blue along his cheekbones and temples. His hair was dark, pulled back and bound with metal rings. He looked young, tired, and completely out of place in the ruins of a dying station. "I am Varric Rahayan," he said, and his voice without the translator was deeper, rougher. "Warlord of the 7th Fleet," he paused, "and I have no idea how to start this machine." Mara felt something loosen in her chest. "Mara Quinn, trauma nurse. And I might have an idea, but it's probably stupid." "Stupid how? Your armor has a thermal reactor, right? I can see the heat signature." She pointed to the glow at his chest plate. "If you can divert some of that energy, create a thermal spike, it might be enough to jumpstart the catalyst." Varric looked at the machine, then at his armor, then at her. "That would drain my reactor's reserve. I would have no protection when the storm returns." "I know. That's why it's stupid." He considered this for approximately 3 seconds. Then he knelt beside the catalyst and began unsealing his chest plate. Mara guided his hands, showing him where to place the reactor core, how to angle it to create maximum contact with the catalyst's ignition chamber. His hands were larger than hers, clawed at the tips, but he moved with surprising delicacy. "Why are you teaching me?" he asked quietly. Mara did not look up from the work. "Because if you learn to start fires, maybe you won't need to put them out by force." Varric went very still. Then he pressed the reactor core against the catalyst's heart. The metal sang. A high, pure note that climbed into frequencies Mara felt more than heard. The catalyst's channels began to glow, First orange, then gold, then white-hot. Heat rolled out in waves that made her skin prickle. The ward's temperature climbed. Ice sublimated from the walls in sheets of vapor. The medical monitors, dormant for hours, flickered back to uncertain life. Mara ran back to check her patients. The pilot's color was improving. The teenager's breathing steadied. The alien opened one eye and made a sound that might have been relief. When she returned to the bay, Varric was sitting against the wall, his armor dimmed, the glow at his chest barely visible. He looked drained. "Your reactor," Mara said, kneeling beside him. "How long until it recharges?" 12 hours, maybe more. He tilted his head back against the wall. "I will freeze when the storm returns. Then we'll keep you warm." He turned to look at her, those strange silver eyes unreadable. "Why?" Mara thought about Daniel, about the short straw, about all the people who ran first and the few who stayed. "Because that's what we do." Varric was quiet for a long time. Then he said something in his own language, soft and wondering. The translator caught only part of it. Warmth, not from machine, from gesture. "We call it Urkal," he said. "Deep fire. I have never felt it before." Mara smiled, exhausted and strangely hopeful. "Welcome to the warmth, Warlord." Outside, the storm gathered its strength. But inside Outpost Halcyon, for the first time in hours, 3 patients and 2 unlikely allies breathed warm air. And somewhere deep in his chest, beneath the armor and the duty and the cold logic of conquest, Varric Rayan felt something he did not have words for. It felt like coming home. The emergency radio crackled to life at 0400 hours, spitting static and fragments of voices. Mara jerked awake from a half-sleep in the medical chair. Across the ward, Varric stood by the window, watching the storm. He had not moved in over an hour, still as a statue, conserving energy. The radio hissed again. This time, beneath the interference, she caught actual words. "Protocol Ember. Repeat. Protocol Ember. Neutral stations. Covenant protection." Mara scrambled to the communications panel and began adjusting frequencies. The message looped, degraded, but persistent. Someone out there was broadcasting on the old medical emergency channels. Varric crossed the room in 3 silent strides. "What is that?" "An automated distress beacon, I think, or maybe a legal broadcast." Mara isolated the clearest frequency and amplified it. The message resolved into clarity. "Under Confederation and Kari Covenant law, Protocol Ember grants absolute protection to neutral medical facilities during armed conflict. Any commanding officer may invoke Protocol Ember to prevent engagement with medical targets. Authorization code Theta 97. This message repeats." Mara looked at Varric. "Did you know about this?" His expression was complicated. "I have heard the name. Ember, it is. A myth among the officer class. A law that supposedly predates the current Dominion. No one I know has ever seen it invoked. But it exists. If that broadcast is genuine, yes." He studied the radio with something like hunger. It would change everything. Mara's hands were already moving, keying in the transmission codes she had memorized during field training. "Then let me broadcast. If there are other Kari ships in the sector, if we can get this protocol recognized, my lieutenant will kill you before your message leaves the atmosphere." Varric's voice was flat. "Rith Voss commands the blockade. He wants this station destroyed, and he wants my command. If he learns I have stayed here, helping you, he will claim I have been compromised. He will take the fleet and finish what I delayed." The hope that had flared in Mara's chest guttered. "Then we're trapped. For now." She wanted to scream. Instead, she went to check on her patients, channeling frustration into medical routine. The pilot was stable. The teenager's seizures had stopped. The 3rd patient, the alien, had shown minimal improvement despite the returning heat. Mara pulled up the medical file and felt the world tilt. The alien was not just any species. The genetic markers, the silver-tinted skin, the bone structure. This was a Kari child. She scrolled through the intake notes, her stomach sinking. The girl had been found in a collapsed shelter on one of the contested moons. No identification, no family registered. The note said suspected hybrid. Someone had run the DNA analysis and flagged it. Human maternal markers, Kari paternal. A child born from violence and somehow surviving in the cracks of war. Mara had been caring for her for 3 days without knowing. She looked up to find Varric standing in the doorway, staring at the medical display. His face had gone absolutely blank. "She is one of ours," he said quietly. "Half," Mara corrected, her voice sharper than she intended. "Half yours, half human, born in a war zone to a mother who probably didn't survive long enough to hold her." Varric moved to the child's bedside. He stood there for a long moment, just looking. Then he did something Mara did not expect. He removed one gauntlet and touched the girl's hand, careful not to wake her. "We do not take prisoners," he said. "We do not allow fraternization. These things are not supposed to exist, but she does exist." "Yes," his voice was rough. "She does." Something broke in Varric's expression. The controlled Warlord facade cracked, and beneath it, Mara saw something raw and uncertain. He pulled his hand back as if burned. "I have spent my life erasing things. Stations, supply lines, resistance cells. I have never—" He struggled for words. "I have never built anything, never preserved. This child should not be possible under Dominion law, but you saved her anyway. That's the job." "No." Varric looked at her directly. "The job is triage. You choose who lives based on probability of survival. This child's prognosis was poor. You could have allocated resources elsewhere, but you chose to care for an enemy hybrid with minimal chance of recovery." Mara met his eyes. "She's not an enemy. She's a kid." Varric was quiet for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice carried something that might have been wonder or grief. "We are taught that mercy is corruption, that compassion weakens the blade, but you look at this child and see only someone who needs help." He glanced at the radio, still whispering its loop of protocol ember. "Perhaps the myths were right. Perhaps we forgot something true." The child stirred in her sleep, her small hand clenching. Varric watched her with an expression Mara could not quite read. Outside, the storm's howl shifted pitch. Somewhere beyond the ice and the dark, Rith Voss was circling with drones and ambition. The radio repeated its ancient promise of protection. And in Ward 7, a Kari warlord stood guard over a human nurse and a child who should not exist. "Teach me more," Varric said suddenly. "About keeping people alive. I want to learn." Mara handed him a scanner. "Start with checking her vitals. I'll show you what to look for." And in the frozen dark of Outpost Halcyon, an Empire's son learned the medicine his people had spent generations trying to destroy. The ventilation system died at dawn. Mara woke to the teenager gasping, his oxygen saturation dropping into the danger zone. She ran to the vent controls and found them dead, the circuits fried by the same power surge that had killed the primary grid. "Damn it!" She grabbed a manual resuscitation bag and began hand-ventilating the boy. Her arms burned after 90 seconds, but she kept the rhythm steady. One squeeze every 4 seconds. Keep the brain alive. Varric appeared beside her. "What do you need?" "Air circulation. The thermocatalyst heats, but without ventilation, carbon dioxide builds up. We'll all suffocate in 6 hours, maybe less." "What would fix it?" "A functioning ventilation system." Mara's voice came out clipped, timed between squeezes. "Which we don't have." Varric studied the dead vents, then the layout of the ward. His tactical mind, trained to analyze battlefield conditions, turned to a different kind of problem. "We improvise," he said. "Show me what materials you have." They laid it out on the floor. Exhaust ducts from the damaged medical bay, thermal blankets, a manual ventilator that could be hand-cranked, broken medical equipment that could be stripped for parts. It looked like junk. To Varric, it looked like a challenge. "Here," he said, sketching in the frost on the floor. We build a differential pressure system. Hot air rises, cold air sinks. If we can create channels that amplify this natural flow and add mechanical assist, we generate circulation. Mara stared at the diagram. It was ingenious and completely insane. That's going to take hours and constant manual input to maintain pressure. Then we work in shifts. They built the stone lung, as Mara began calling it, piece by piece. Varric's strength made quick work of the heavy lifting, bending ducts and anchoring them to the ceiling. Mara's medical knowledge guided the placement, ensuring optimal airflow for the patients. The hardest part was the manual ventilator. Someone had to crank it every few minutes to push air through the system. Mara took first shift, feeling the burn in her shoulders after 10 minutes. Varric took over without asking. His rhythm was different from hers, stronger, but he adjusted when she showed him how to match the patient's breathing cycles. They fell into a pattern. She pushed, he pulled, back and forth, a mechanical dance that kept 3 people alive. "You are good at this," Varric said after an hour. His voice was strained with effort, but steady. "Building from nothing. Trauma nursing is half improvisation. You learn to make do." Mara checked the temperature gauge, still rising. The thermocatalyst was working too well, pulling from Varric's armor reactor faster than predicted. "Your power reserves are draining." "I know." "When the storm returns, you will freeze." "I know." Mara grabbed his arm, forcing him to stop cranking. "Then we shut it down. Reduce the heat output, preserve your reactor." Varric looked at the 3 sleeping patients, then back at her. His face was marked with exhaustion and something else. Determination. "My blood can withstand cold longer than human tissue. It is an acceptable trade." "It's not acceptable if you die." "I have spent 38 years dealing death." He resumed cranking, his rhythm steady. "Allow me 1 day of providing life, even if it costs me." The words hung in the air between them. Mara wanted to argue, to demand that he save himself, to point out the tactical stupidity of a warlord sacrificing his defensive capabilities. But she saw something in his eyes that stopped her. He was not being noble. He was being selfish. He wanted this, needed it, the way a man dying of thirst needs water. So she let him burn. They worked through the morning, refining the stone lung's efficiency. Varric proved surprisingly creative with limited resources, suggesting modifications that Mara would never have considered. He used the thermal blankets not just as insulation, but as directional panels, guiding hot air where they needed it most. "Where did you learn this?" Mara asked, watching him adjust a duct angle with mathematical precision. "Fleet logistics. When you command a warship, you learn that every system is 3 parts engineering and 7 parts prayer." He smiled, a brief quirk of his mouth that made him look younger. "The Kari build for conquest, but space is indifferent to empire. Equipment fails. You adapt, or you die." "Sounds familiar." "Yes?" He looked at her with those strange silver eyes. "You fight like us, just on the warm side of the blade." Mara felt something shift in her chest. This alien warrior, this enemy, understood her in a way few humans ever had. The constant improvisation, the refusal to abandon the mission, the willingness to burn yourself out for people who could not thank you. They were not so different. The ventilator rhythm changed and they both reached for it at the same time. Their hands collided on the crank. Neither pulled away. "Thank you," Mara said quietly. "For staying. For helping. You could have left." "So could you. I told you. I don't run anymore." Varric's thumb brushed against her knuckles, a fleeting contact that might have been accident or intent. "Neither do I. Not from this." The stone lung wheezed and rattled, pushing air through ducts that were never meant to serve as lungs. But it worked. The carbon dioxide levels stabilized. The patients breathed clean air, and in the freezing ruins of Outpost Halcyon, a human nurse and a Kari warlord kept cranking in rhythm, their breath synchronizing, their survival tied to a beat that neither could maintain alone. Outside, the storm prepared its return. Inside, Varric's armor dimmed further, its reserves bleeding out as warmth. Mara watched the power gauge drop and said nothing. Some fires were worth burning for. Ryth Voss made his move at 1800 hours. The first drone appeared on the perimeter sensors like a shark in dark water. Then another. Then 6 more, circling the outpost in tightening spirals. Varric stood at the observation window, his expression carved from ice. "He has declared me compromised. This is a siege." Mara joined him, watching the drones. They were smaller than she expected, almost elegant in their lethality. "Can you call them off?" "I could try." He would ignore the command and document my refusal to execute standing orders. Varric's jaw tightened. By dawn, he will have justification to assume fleet command and finish the operation. Operation? You mean destroy this station with everyone inside? Yes. Mara's mind raced. 3 patients, 2 defenders, and a medical outpost that could not withstand concentrated fire. The tactical situation was hopeless, which meant they needed to change the tactical situation. "How do the drones target?" she asked. Varric glanced at her. "Thermal signature primarily. They are designed to locate life signs and fortified positions." "So they look for heat concentrations?" "Yes." An idea took shape, dangerous and probably stupid. "What if we give them too many targets to prioritize?" She explained quickly, pulling Varric to the medical supply room. The saline ampules were designed to retain temperature for extended periods during field transport. With the right configuration, heated and placed strategically, they could create multiple thermal signatures across the outpost. Varric caught on immediately. "You want to confuse their targeting matrix, make them divide fire across false positives. It won't fool them for long, but it might buy us time." "Time for what?" "For you to broadcast Protocol Ember. If we can get that message authenticated and logged into the Kari tactical network, Ryth can't ignore it without facing court-martial." Varric was quiet for 3 seconds. Then he nodded once, sharp and decisive. "Show me what you need." They worked fast. Mara heated the saline ampules using the thermocatalyst, then rigged them with timed-release pressure valves. Varric helped position them throughout the outpost, medical bay, crew quarters, communications hub, even the destroyed docking platform. Each ampule would release heated saline vapor at intervals, creating thermal blooms that mimicked human body heat. Not perfect, but close enough to make the drones hesitate. "This is brilliant," Varric said, watching her calibrate the last valve. "Tactical misdirection using medical supplies. You have the mind of a fleet commander." Mara shook her head. "I have the mind of someone who has worked too many disaster zones. You learn to make do with what you have. That is precisely what makes you dangerous." He smiled, genuinely smiled, and it transformed his face from beautiful to devastating. Humans fight ugliest when you are cornered. They returned to the communications hub. Varric began the authentication sequence for Protocol Ember, his fingers moving across the Kari interface with practiced speed. The broadcast would take 40 seconds to encode and transmit. The drones closed in. Mara activated the thermal decoys. For 90 glorious seconds, it worked. The drones scattered, targeting the false heat signatures, their firing solutions fragmenting across multiple points. Ryth's voice crackled over the tactical channel, sharp with frustration. "Target dispersal detected. Analyzing." Varric's fingers flew faster. 30 seconds to broadcast. The teenager woke up screaming. His seizures had returned, triggered by stress or fever or just bad luck. Mara ran to him, injecting anticonvulsants, talking him through the terror. The boy grabbed her hand hard enough to hurt. 20 seconds. Ryth's voice again, colder now. Heat signature patterns recognized as medical equipment, clever, targeting ward location directly. Mara looked up. 3 drones had broken formation and were converging on Ward 7, where the patients lay vulnerable. "Varric!" 10 seconds. A targeting laser painted the wall above the teenager's bed. Mara threw herself over him as the first round punched through the outer wall. The explosion was smaller than expected, designed to breach rather than demolish. Rith wanted the station damaged, not destroyed. Not yet. 5 seconds. Varric hit the final command. The protocol Ember broadcast uploaded, authenticated, transmitted across the Kari tactical network, and failed. The screen flashed red. Error code, authorization revoked, command override in effect. Varric stared at the display, his face draining of color. He blocked it. Rith intercepted the authentication request and revoked the protocol at the command level. Can he do that? Not legally, but by the time a tribunal reviews his actions, this station will be ash. Varric's hands clenched into fists. He has won! Mara pulled the teenager closer, feeling him shake against her. The pilot was awake now too, eyes wide with fear. The Kari child slept on, oblivious. Rith's voice filled the comm channel, triumphant and cold. Lord Rain, your mercy has become transmitted weakness. I am assuming fleet command under Article 7. You have until dawn to surrender yourself and the human collaborator. Resistance will be met with terminal force. The transmission cut. The drones reformed, taking up positions around the outpost like executioners waiting for sunrise. Varric stood very still, his armor's glow nearly extinguished. He looked at Mara, at the patients, at the makeshift stone lung still wheezing its mechanical breath. I am sorry, he said quietly. I have failed you. Mara set the teenager down gently and stood. Her hands were shaking, but her voice came out steady. We're not done yet. Mara, we're not done. The storm is coming back. You still have some power in that armor, and I still have medical supplies. She moved to the windows, counting drones, calculating odds that did not exist. We have until dawn. That's 6 hours. To do what? She turned to face him. To teach your people that warmth is stronger than cold. Varric looked at her like she had offered him salvation or madness, and he could not tell which. Then he nodded once and moved to stand beside her. Outside, the storm gathered. The drones waited. Dawn approached like a blade. But inside Outpost Halcyon, 2 unlikely allies began planning their last impossible stand. The storm returned at 2200 hours, and it brought the cold with it. Mara felt the temperature drop like a physical blow. The thermocatalyst, running on fumes, could not keep pace with the ionic winds that turned the station's hull into a conductor of absolute zero. Varric tried to hide it at first. He stood guard by the window, watching the drones maintain their vigil through sheets of ice that formed and reformed on the glass. But Mara saw the tremors start in his hands, then spread to his shoulders. Your armor, she said. Reserves at 4%, insufficient for thermal regulation. His voice was tight, controlled. It will not matter. When Ryth attacks at dawn, we will have larger concerns. Sit down before you fall down. He did not argue. That alone told her how bad it was. Mara checked her patience. They were stable, thanks to the stone lung and the thermocatalysts' dying warmth. But Varric was shutting down, his enhanced biology unable to compensate for the cold without his armor's support. She had 1 thermal blanket left, the last one. She had been saving it for an emergency, but looking at Varric's silver eyes glazing with hypothermia, she realized the emergency was now. Come here, she said, pulling him away from the window. The patients are stable. You are not. She wrapped the blanket around him, but it was not enough. His core temperature was dropping too fast. Kari biology ran hotter than human, their metabolic rate tuned for quick combat burns. Without external heat, he would slip into stasis, then death. Mara made a decision that was probably stupid and definitely necessary. She climbed onto the medical cot beside him and pulled him close, wrapping the blanket around both of them. Varric stiffened in surprise, then slowly relaxed as her body heat began to register. What are you doing? He asked, his voice rough. Keeping you alive. Standard hypothermia treatment. Share body heat. Stop being stoic and let me help you. He was silent for a long moment. Then, carefully, he shifted position so they fit together more efficiently. His armor was cold against her, but beneath it she could feel him shivering. "You should save the blanket for yourself," he said. "Shut up and get warm." Outside, the storm screamed. The drones, designed to withstand extreme conditions, held their positions like patient death. The thermocatalyst wheezed, its output dropping another degree. Mara felt Varric's breathing slow, his body trying to conserve energy. She had seen this before in trauma patients, the slide toward shutdown. She tightened her hold on him. "Stay with me. Keep talking." "About what?" "Anything. Tell me about Kari, your home." Varric was quiet, then spoke softly. "I have not been home in 16 years. I was sent to officer training at 22 and never returned. The Dominion does not encourage attachments." "What about family?" "Dead or distant. We do not maintain those connections. They weaken resolve." He shivered harder. "Or so we are taught." Mara thought about Daniel, about the way she still kept his last message saved in her comm unit, about how she had chosen to stay because running first had cost her the only family she had left. "Connections make us stronger," she said. "They give us reasons to fight. Or reasons to break." She felt him slipping, his consciousness dimming at the edges. Hypothermia was taking him down fast. She needed to do something, anything, to keep him anchored. Without thinking, following instinct she did not understand, Mara pressed her forehead against his. Varric went absolutely still. The gesture, unknown to her, was the deepest form of trust in Kari culture. Foreheads touching, vulnerable and exposed, was reserved for bonded pairs, for parents and children, for warriors who had saved each other's lives enough times that debt became irrelevant. She had just told him, in his language, that he was family. "Mara," he whispered, and his voice broke on her name. "I've got you. You're not alone." She felt him shake, but not from cold this time. His arms came up around her, careful even now, and he held on like she was the only solid thing in a universe of ice. "I should not be here," he said against her hair. "I should have destroyed this place and moved on. But I saw you covering that patient with your jacket, and I—" He struggled for words. "I could not remember the last time I saw someone choose care over survival." "Maybe that's the same thing." "No. Survival is logic. Care is." He pulled back, just enough to meet her eyes. "Care is warmth. Urkal, the thing I never learned." Mara smiled, exhausted and freezing and strangely at peace. "You're learning now." They stayed like that, foreheads pressed together, breathing the same air. Outside, the storm tore at the station. The drones waited with inhuman patience. Dawn crept closer, but between one breath and the next, Varric's shivering stopped. Not because he was dying, but because he had found something warmer than armor, deeper than reactor heat. He had found what humans had always known, and Kari had forgotten, that the coldest dark could not touch the warmth of someone who refused to let you freeze alone. "Thank you," he said quietly. Mara tightened her hold on him. "Thank you for staying." The thermocatalyst sputtered. The temperature dropped another degree, but wrapped in each other and one thin blanket, they stayed warm enough to survive. Outside, one of the drones adjusted its targeting parameters. Inside, a human nurse and a Kari warlord slept in fits and starts, their bodies generating heat that machines could never match. And when dawn came, they would face it together. Dawn arrived not with light but with silence. The storm had passed, leaving Astra Corvus wrapped in crystalline stillness. Through the observation window, Mara watched the frozen landscape turn from black to gray to pale, deadly blue. The drones had not moved. They waited, patient as tombstones. Varric was already awake when she opened her eyes. He sat at the edge of the cot, his armor barely glowing, staring at his hands. She recognized the posture. She had seen it in soldiers about to do something they would not come back from. "What are you planning?" she asked. "Rith gave me until dawn. Dawn is here." Varric stood, the motion slow and deliberate. I will surrender myself and face judgment for violating standing orders. They'll execute you. Yes. Mara grabbed his arm, forcing him to look at her. That's not a plan. That's suicide. It is the only way to buy you time. Wraith wants a spectacle, wants to broadcast my weakness to the fleet. While he is occupied with my trial, you can evacuate the patients, transmit distress signals, possibly reach Confederation forces before he kills everyone anyway. Mara's voice was sharp. You think showing him you can be broken will make him merciful? He'll execute you and destroy the station just to prove a point. Varric gently removed her hand from his arm. Perhaps, but perhaps he will hesitate. Doubt is a crack in certainty. It is all I can give you. The teenager chose that moment to wake up, disoriented and scared. Mara went to him automatically, checking vitals, adjusting the IV, murmuring reassurance. The pilot was awake too, watching them with knowing eyes. When she returned, Varric had moved to the communications panel. He was entering commands, his movements precise despite his weakened state. What are you doing? Preparing final command logs. When Rith assumes control, he will need authentication codes, fleet rosters, tactical data. Varric pulled a small metallic seal from his armor's inner compartment. This is the Lord Commander seal. Whoever carries it speaks with full fleet authority. He held it out to her. Mara stared at the seal. It was smaller than she expected, inscribed with symbols she could not read, glowing faintly with embedded technology. I cannot give you my life, Varric said quietly, but I can give you my voice. If I fall, this seal makes you Lord Commander by Kari law. The fleet will hear your orders. I'm not Kari. They won't follow a human. They will follow the seal. It is older than the Dominion, tied to protocols that predate our current government. He pressed it into her palm, closing her fingers around it. Including Protocol Ember. With this, you can invoke protection for neutral medical stations. Rith cannot override it without committing treason against laws he cannot erase. Mara looked at the seal, then at him. You planned this. Last night when you let me warm you, you knew you were going to do this. I knew I would not waste whatever time I had left. The words hit her harder than they should. She wanted to be angry, to accuse him of manipulation or noble stupidity, but she saw the truth in his eyes. He had spent the night memorizing what warmth felt like because he knew he would die cold. Don't do this, she said. I must. Why? Varric reached out and touched her face, a fleeting contact that carried weight beyond words. Because you taught me that some things are worth burning for. And if I burn, perhaps it will light something in my people that cannot be extinguished. He pulled on his helmet, and the human beneath disappeared behind the Kari warrior's mask. When he spoke again, his voice carried the filtered distance of the translator. Keep them alive, Mara Quinn. The patients, the child, yourself. Keep them warm. He moved toward the airlock. Mara ran after him, grabbing his armored hand. He stopped, but did not turn. Please, she said, and hated how broken it sounded. Don't leave me here alone. Varric's hand tightened on hers, just for a moment, brief and fierce. Then he gently pulled away. You are the bravest person I have ever known. You will not be alone. You will be warmer than I could ever make you. The airlock opened. Frozen air rushed in, carrying the smell of ice and ozone. Varric stepped through, and the door began to seal. Varric! He paused in the threshold, one hand on the outer door control. Mara did not know what to say. Thank you seemed inadequate. Stay seemed impossible. I need you seemed too true. So she said the only thing that mattered. Come back warm. Through the helmet, she could not see his face, but she heard the catch in his breathing, the way the translator failed to filter emotion from the single word he spoke. Remembered. The airlock sealed. Through the window, Mara watched him walk out into the frozen dawn, a lone figure in battered armor approaching the ring of waiting drones. She clutched the command seal so hard it cut into her palm. Behind her, the pilot spoke for the first time in hours, his voice rough from disuse. "That man is going to die for us. I know. What are you going to do about it?" Mara looked at the seal in her hand, then at the patient's, then at the stone lung still wheezing its mechanical breath. She thought about Daniel and the short straw, about running first and staying after, about what it meant to be warm in a universe of cold. "I'm going to make sure he doesn't die alone." She moved to the communications panel and began entering commands. The seal slotted into the authentication port like it had been waiting for her. Outside, Rithvas's voice crackled across the tactical channel, triumphant and cruel. "Lord Rhine, how the mighty have fallen. Prepare to answer for your weakness." Mara's hands moved across the controls, her medical training translating to tactical systems with surprising ease. Find the problem. Diagnose. Treat. She would not let Varric burn alone. And if fire was what it took to teach the Kari warmth, then she would give them an inferno they could never forget. Varric stood in the center of the drone circle and waited for death. Rithvas appeared from behind the nearest ice formation, flanked by 4 armored Kari soldiers. He moved with the swagger of certain victory, his armor pristine where Varric's was scarred and dimmed. "Lord Rain." Rith's voice carried across the frozen ground. "Or should I say former Lord Rain? You have dishonored the Dominion, betrayed your fleet, and contaminated yourself with human weakness." Varric said nothing. He focused on staying upright, on not showing how badly the cold was affecting him, on buying Mara every second he could. Nothing to say. Rith circled him like a predator. "No defense of your actions? No explanation for why you stayed in that ruin, protecting our enemies?" "They are not enemies," Varric said quietly. "They are wounded. They are weak." Rith's voice rose. "And you have become weak with them. The fleet has witnessed your collapse. They know you chose a human over duty. They know you are compromised." Behind Rith, the soldiers shifted uncomfortably. Varric noticed. Good. Doubt was a crack. "I was not compromised," Varric said. "I was educated." Rith laughed. Harsh and mocking. "Educated in what? Human sentimentality? Mercy as policy? You have forgotten everything that makes us strong." "No." Varric's hands were shaking from cold and exhaustion, but his voice steadied. "I remembered what we forgot." He reached up and unsealed his helmet. The soldiers inhaled sharply. In Kari culture, removing armor in the field was surrender or suicide. To do it before subordinates was unthinkable. Varric pulled the helmet free and let it fall to the ice. His face was exposed to the killing cold. The bioluminescent marks along his cheekbones pulsed blue in the dawn light. His eyes, silver and unwavering, met Rith's without flinching. "I am Varric Rayan," he said, and his voice carried without the translator, raw and real. "I have served the Dominion for 16 years. I have conquered 12 systems. I have erased 4 rebellions. I have been a blade in the dark." He paused, letting the words settle. "And in one night, a human nurse taught me more about strength than all my years of conquest." Rith's hand moved to his weapon. "Silence this madness." "No." Varric's voice rose, projecting across the ice. "You will hear me. The fleet will hear me. Open channel. Broadcast to all ships." "I will do no such." Mara's voice cut through the morning air, amplified by the station's external speakers and the command seal's override authority. "Galactic channel open. Broadcasting on all Kari tactical frequencies." "Go ahead, Lord Rain." Rith spun toward the station, shock cracking his composure. "How did she?" "I gave her my seal," Varric said. "She speaks with fleet authority now. Interrupt her, and you commit treason against protocols older than your ambition." The soldiers were looking at each other now, uncertain. This had stopped being an execution and become something else, something unprecedented. Varric turned to face the nearest drone, knowing its camera would transmit to every ship in the sector. Kari Fleet, hear me. I was made to erase. I was taught that mercy weakens, that care corrupts, that warmth is a flaw to be burned away. His voice roughened with emotion. I was wrong. We have all been wrong. He gestured toward the station, toward Mara, watching from the window with 3 patients and a dying thermocatalyst, an impossible, stubborn hope. That human stayed when she could have fled. She taught an enemy how to build fire instead of spreading it. She protected a Kari child born from violence because she saw only someone who needed help. Varric's breath frosted in the air. She gave me warmth when I had earned only cold. Rith was moving now, weapon raised. Enough of this. I learned something in that ruined station. Varric spoke faster, his words tumbling out before Rith could silence them. I learned that strength is not the absence of care. It is care despite cost. I learned that the humans fight differently than us, and perhaps they fight better. The soldiers had stopped moving. Somewhere in orbit, fleet commanders were listening to this broadcast with their hands frozen on their controls. I cannot undo what I have destroyed, Varric said, but I can choose what I protect now, and I choose warmth over cold, care over conquest, the human Mara Quinn over my own survival. He dropped to one knee in the ice, a posture of submission that was also somehow defiant. Any fire that serves me will serve one purpose today. Protect Outpost Halcyon. Protect the wounded. Protect the nurse who taught a warlord how to be warm. Rith leveled his weapon at Varric's head. You are a traitor and a fool. Perhaps, but I will die warm. Before Rith could fire, the world turned white. Mara had activated the Stone Lungs manual crank and pushed it past maximum, forcing superheated air through every duct at once. The temperature differential with the frozen atmosphere created instant fog, a rolling wall of steam that swallowed the killing field in seconds. The drone's targeting systems failed, confused by thermal chaos. The soldiers stumbled, visibility reduced to arm's length. Rith's shot went wide, scorching ice instead of flesh. And in the whiteout chaos, Varric felt something he had not expected. The warmth of being heard. Across the tactical network, silence reigned. Then, one by one, weapon systems began powering down. Not all of them, not even most, but enough. Enough to crack certainty. Enough to plant doubt in the Empire's cold heart. Varric closed his eyes and smiled, blood freezing on his lips where the cold had split them. He had burned, and the light was spreading. The fog cleared in patches, revealing a battlefield transformed. Half the drones had withdrawn to holding positions, their combat protocols overridden by confused fleet commanders. The other half circled tighter, awaiting Rith's orders. The soldiers stood frozen between duty and doubt. Rith emerged from the whiteout, his weapon still trained on Varric. His voice shook with fury barely contained. Treasonous speech will not save you. I have operational authority. This station dies regardless of your pathetic display. Varric pushed himself to his feet, swaying. The cold was killing him by degrees, but he had one move left. Then you will have to go through me. He reached into his armor's core and pulled the last trick Mara had taught him. Emergency power diversion. Every reserve, every failsafe, every drop of energy left in his dying reactor, he channeled into a single thermal pulse. The armor blazed white-hot. Snow beneath his feet sublimated instantly, creating a circle of clear ground in the ice. Heat radiated outward in waves visible to thermal optics, a perfect sphere of warmth in the frozen wasteland. The drones locked on the signature and stopped, programming designed to avoid firing on fleet commanders, creating hesitation in their targeting matrices. They were machines that could not compute the paradox, attack the heat, or preserve the authority. Varric stood at the center of his circle, arms spread, burning himself out like a star going supernova. Kari, he broadcast, his voice carrying across every channel. "Look at me. Heat is not weakness. Warmth is not flaw. This circle is my declaration. I choose to burn so others may live. That is strength." Rith screamed orders at the drones. "Override! Fire on Lord Rain directly." The machines hesitated, then slowly began to comply. Mara's voice cut through the channel, sharp and desperate. "Protocol Ember, authorization Theta 9-7, transmitted under Lord Commander Seal. All attacks on neutral medical facilities cease immediately." The drones stopped, not because the protocol worked. Protocol Ember had been sabotaged, its codes corrupted by Rith's interference. They stopped because Mara had transmitted the code under Varric's seal, and that seal carried command authority that even Ryth could not legally override without a formal tribunal. The machines hung in legal limbo, awaiting resolution. Ryth made his choice. If the drones would not fire, he would finish this himself. He advanced on Varric, weapon raised. "Your tricks end here. Your warmth dies with you." Varric did not raise a weapon, did not activate his armor's defensive systems, did not move from his circle. He simply waited. Rith stepped into the circle of heat, and Varric did the one thing no Kari warrior had done in over 200 years of conquest. He dropped to his knees and embraced his enemy, not to restrain, not to strike, to hold. "Feel it," Varric whispered, his arms wrapped around Rith's rigid form. "Feel what I learned. Feel the warmth." Rith struggled, trying to pull away, but Varric's grip, though weakening, held firm. The circle of heat enveloped them both. The armor's thermal pulse burned through Rith's defenses, not as weapon, but as gift. For the first time in his life, Rith Voss felt warmth given freely, without conquest or transaction. It broke something in him. The weapon fell from his hand. His breath came in gasps that had nothing to do with the cold, and in his eyes, visible through his helmet's transparent sections, ice that had formed from atmospheric moisture on his lashes began to crack and fall. He was crying. The most ambitious, brutal, efficient officer in the 7th Fleet was crying in the arms of the commander he had meant to execute. Varric held him tighter. "This is what they fear we will learn. That care is not weakness. That warmth makes us strong." The transmission was still broadcasting. Across the sector, on dozens of warships, Kari officers watched this impossible scene unfold, watched their superior, the epitome of Dominion efficiency, unmade by an embrace. One by one, weapon systems powered down. Not all of them. The Dominion was old and cold and not easily changed, but enough. Enough that the tide of certainty began to turn. Rith's hands came up, shaking, and gripped Varric's armor, not to push away, to hold on. "I do not understand," he said, his voice breaking. "How can this be strength? How can caring not destroy us?" "Because humans taught me a truth we forgot." Varric's voice was fading, the last of his power burning away. "Strength is not the absence of breaking. It is choosing what we break for." He released Rith and staggered back. The circle of heat collapsed as his armor finally died, its glow extinguishing completely. Varric fell to his knees in the ice, his body surrendering to the cold it had fought for too long. Rith stood over him, weapon forgotten, face wet with tears that froze as they fell. "What do I do now?" he asked, and he sounded like a child. Varric smiled, blood on his lips from cold, cracked skin. "Learn, as I learned. Find someone warm, and ask them to teach you." His eyes closed. Mara was already running from the station, emergency medical kit in hand, screaming Varric's name into the frozen dawn. The drones parted to let her through, and across the Kari 7th Fleet, in dozens of command centers, officers sat in silence and tried to understand what they had witnessed. An empire had been taught warmth. The lesson would not take root everywhere, but it had been planted, and even the coldest ice could not kill a seed that burned. Varric woke to warmth and the smell of tea. His first confused thought was that he had died, and whatever came after was kinder than he deserved. His second thought was pain. His third was Mara's voice, close and relieved. "About time. You have been unconscious for 3 days." He opened his eyes to find himself in Ward 7, covered in thermal blankets, connected to more medical equipment than seemed necessary. Mara sat beside his bed holding a steaming cup and looking exhausted in a way that suggested she had not slept much. "The patients," he managed, his voice wrecked. "Alive? Stable? The teenager is actually walking around and complaining about the food, which is the best sign of recovery I could ask for." She set the cup down and checked his vitals with practiced efficiency. "The pilot has been helping me with repairs, and the child." Mara's expression softened. "She woke up yesterday, asked for her mother in a language that is half Kari, half human pigeon. I am teaching her both properly." Varric tried to sit up. His body informed him that was a terrible idea. Mara pushed him back down, gently but firmly. "Your armor saved your life." "Barely. You burned out every system, but the emergency stasis protocols kept your core temperature from dropping into fatal range long enough for me to stabilize you." She looked at him with an expression he could not quite read. "You died for 90 seconds. I had to restart your heart twice. I am sorry. Do not apologize for being warm." Her voice cracked slightly. "Do not ever apologize for that." He reached for her hand. She took it, threading their fingers together in a way that felt more significant than tactical alliance. "What happened?" he asked. "Rith. The fleet." Mara smiled, tired and genuine. "Rith stood down, ordered full withdrawal and requested formal tribunal to review the engagement. Turns out, having a public breakdown broadcast across the entire sector is surprisingly effective at getting people to ask questions. He will be court-martialed. Maybe. Or maybe he will be the first Kari officer to formally request asylum with Confederation forces to study what he called human warmth protocols. She squeezed his hand. "He visits every day, brings medical supplies, asks if there is anything he can do to help. Yesterday he spent 2 hours helping the teenager with physical therapy." Varric absorbed this, his world reordering itself around impossible facts. "The Dominion will not allow—" "The Dominion is having what my commander calls an extremely loud internal argument." Scowl. Mara pulled up a screen showing news feeds. "Your broadcast went viral, not just in Kari space, everywhere. Humans are calling you the warlord who learned to love. Kari reformists are citing you as proof that the Dominion's policies need revision. Conservative factions are demanding your execution for treason." She scrolled to another feed, and the Confederation Council just passed emergency legislation recognizing Protocol Ember as binding galactic law. They are calling it the Rayan-Quinn Protocol. Every neutral medical station in known space now has legal protection backed by multi-species enforcement. Varric stared at the screen. "We changed law. We changed hearts. Law followed." Mara turned off the display. "The Confederation is installing thermocatalysts in every border station. Your warmth circle has become a symbol. People are building monuments. That is absurd. That is hope." She stood and moved to the window. "Come see when you can walk. I have something to show you." It took him another day to manage it, leaning heavily on Mara and a support cane that Rith had delivered with a note that simply said, "Learning. Thank you." Mara led him outside for the first time since the circle of heat. The outpost had been transformed. Where drones had circled with killing intent, construction equipment now worked to repair the damage. Confederation engineers worked alongside Kari technical crews, their joint effort creating something neither could have built alone. And in the center of the compound, where Varric had fallen, people were building a cairn, humans and Kari together, stacking stones in careful patterns. At the top, a thermocatalyst burned in perpetual flame, its heat visible as shimmer in the cold air. "They come from everywhere," Mara said quietly. "Refugees we helped, soldiers who watched your broadcast, Kari who want to learn what you learned. They bring stones and add them to the beacon." A sign had been erected beside it, text in multiple languages. House of Heat. Enter who needs. Varric felt something break and reform in his chest. I do not deserve this. None of us deserve warmth. That is not how it works. Mara squeezed his hand. Warmth is given. We just have to be brave enough to accept it. A small figure detached from the construction crew and ran toward them. The Kari child, her silver eyes bright, stopped just short and held out something in her small hands. A cup of tea. For Varric, she said in careful standard, Mara says tea is warmth you drink. He took the cup with shaking hands, this impossibility of a child smiling at him like he was worth saving. Thank you, he managed. She beamed and ran back to help with the stones. Mara led him to a smaller structure near the beacon. This is what I wanted to show you. The building was new, prefabricated but solid. The sign read, Halcyon Medical Commons, Warmth House. Through the windows he could see medical bays, a communal dining area, and what looked like living quarters. I petitioned for permission to stay, Mara said. To run a permanent neutral clinic for anyone who needs it. Confederation approved it, provided funding even. They are calling it the first official warmth station. You are staying. Someone has to teach people how to be warm. She looked at him. I was hoping you might stay too, as security consultant or medical assistant or just someone who knows how to build fire. Varric looked at the beacon, at the child playing with stones, at the crews working together, at Mara waiting for his answer with hope in her eyes. He thought about 16 years of conquest, about cold efficiency and calculated destruction, about everything he had been taught to value. And he thought about one night with a human nurse who refused to run, who taught him that warmth was strength, who had died and come back to pull him from the ice. I was destined for cold, he said, but you taught me something better. What is that? He set down the tea and took both her hands in his, careful with his claws, gentle with his strength. You taught me how to come home. Mara smiled, and it was warm enough to melt worlds. The Dominion stripped Varric of his rank 3 days later. He laughed when the notification came through, a sound that startled the medical staff and made Mara grin. Wraith sent a message. They took my command too. Good. I was terrible at conquest, requesting transfer to Warmth House Medical Training Program. The child, who they learned was named Kiva, drew pictures of the beacon with crayons donated by a Confederation supply ship. She gave one to Varric. He hung it in his quarters like a medal. The teenager went home to his colony with a promise to visit. The pilot stayed to help with construction. More people came, humans seeking purpose, Kari seeking change, aliens of a dozen species who had heard about the warlord who chose warmth. The House of Heat grew, and on clear mornings, when Aster Corvus turned from frozen dark to frozen blue, Varric and Mara stood together at the beacon and shared tea. What do humans call this? Varric asked one morning, gesturing at the steam rising from their cups, at the people working below, at the warmth radiating from stones stacked by former enemies. This feeling. Mara thought about Daniel and the short straw, about running and staying, about cold that kills and warmth that saves. We call it home, she said. Varric smiled, his bioluminescent marks glowing soft blue in the dawn. Then I am home. The beacon's flame cut through the frozen atmosphere, visible from orbit. Ships passing Aster Corvus adjusted course to see it, this impossible fire on an impossible world. They said a warlord learned warmth there. They said a human taught an empire how to care. They said if you went to the House of Heat, no matter who you were or what you had done, someone would make you tea and teach you that cold was not forever. The stories spread. The warmth grew. And in a universe of dark and ice and endless war, one small outpost proved that the most powerful force in existence was not conquest or efficiency or calculated destruction. It was choosing to stay warm together. That was humanity's lesson. That was the gift they gave the stars. Humanity, fuck yeah. In the end, it wasn't a warlord who saved the stars. It was someone who refused to let another being freeze alone. Humanity's power was never in its weapons, but in its unbearable insistence on caring, even when logic says to stop. Warmth, after all, isn't the opposite of cold. It's the rebellion against it. So tell me, what would you choose to protect if no one was watching? Would you still light a fire for a stranger who once called you enemy? And how much of yourself would you be willing to burn to keep someone else alive? If you felt something tonight, type warmth in the comments so we know you stayed until the end. Tell us where on this small spinning planet you're watching from. Subscribe not because the algorithm told you to, but because maybe, just maybe, you believe warmth deserves reinforcements. Hit like, share the story so the cold out there feels a little less infinite, and stick around for the next tale in the corner of your screen, because somewhere out there, another impossible act of humanity is about to begin.